So you might know me as the developer of Notch, and you're probably expecting me to talk about Notch, but I'm not going to, actually. I want to talk about something else. Although it probably will come up, let's be honest. So I've worked in graphics for like 20-something years. I've worked in video games before I worked in live. So I had a long career before I worked in live. And I've probably been doing graphics programming for about 30 years. And what I want to talk about today is the relationship between the real-time graphics industry as a whole and the things that have happened in it and how it's impacted live over the years, like how that two-way street goes. And also so I want to talk about the past, like the distant past, all the way through to the present day, and also try and make some predictions about the future, like what's going to happen in the near future. So there's always a relationship between hardware and software and its users. Like, software is developed for a certain industry, and users use it on that industry, and they feed back. They ask for things. They want changes, and the software and the hardware change to accommodate them, right? But at the same time, the software and the hardware impose limits or creativity on the user. Like, people, there's so many cases of this. Like, imagine shows 10, 20 years ago that heavily used the creative effects possible by like the image processing in a Catalyst or Hippo, right? Or the mapping possibilities for D3, or all the shows that went out with the stock notch effects back in like 2015 or something. And or like all the rocky landscapes you saw when UE5 came out, because it was suddenly easy to make good-looking rocky landscapes. Like, there's always this case of, we got a two-way street. The technical possibilities feed what is done creatively. But the issue with the live video world is that it doesn't have a massive hardware and software development capability in the graphics, let's be honest, right? Most of the work done on graphics, like people making GPUs or large engines, they're not making it for live, they're making it for other things, like video games. Like, people don't build a GPU thinking about live, sadly. So while there is a two-way street, and while there is stuff developed, particularly for the case of, there is stuff developed for live, there are software companies working only in live, like we know about the media servers and so on. Like, a lot of the stuff you use wasn't made for you originally. It's been things that you've appropriated, things like After Effects or Cinema 4D or Unreal Engine. These things are not originally made for you, but you've had to use them. So the relationship, in a way, between graphics and live is more of a one-way street. Like, you're getting stuff pushed onto you that you use and you have to take advantage of. So that's why I think it's important to understand the background a bit, like, of how this stuff's come about. When we think about the hardware capabilities, like when the Kinect camera came along, all the tracking, all the things that were now possible because of that was a camera built for an Xbox. It wasn't built for the many interactive projects that used it. Or like the LiDAR scanners we've taken from automotive and used them for tracking. All the way through to the present day AI innovations being done by NVIDIA, the virtual backgrounds and so on. They're really useful for live, but they're not made for live. And you often had to squeeze them into a project and deal with their creative limitations, as anyone who had to wire up a Kinect camera to make it work on a stage will well remember. And things are only going to go that way. Like, a lot of the tools being developed now, they're still not developed for you. So I want to kind of go back through history a bit and like see how things have come about. And yeah, I'm going to have to rush for time. Sorry, I pressed the wrong button. With that button. So I'm going to go right back to the Commodore 64. I'm going to skip really ancient history and start on the 8-bit era, right? So this is the start of the home computing boom, like this Commodore 64 and the ZX. And this is how games looked back then. Like, the hardware was massively limited, very low color palette. Like, you really couldn't do very much with it, right? And there was other hardware around. There was like Silicon Graphics doing workstations, but not many people could afford those at home. So they were not fully explored creatively in the way that home computers are explored. So at the same time as video games, like you see a couple of well-known games today, very 2D, low colors. The same thing, like the cracking scene spun up in the 80s. So this was the scene of taking a video game, removing the copy protection, and putting it out and flogging it down the market, right? But what happened with cracking scene is that a load of the people who were doing the cracks wanted to make themselves famous, so they started putting little intros on the beginning of their video games when they cracked them, and to show their name and so on. And this was like the real start of a creative coding scene on computers. People who are taking this kind of, they're doing these creative things just for the hell of doing creative stuff. And this later grew into the demo scene. Fucking hell, I keep pressing the wrong key. The right key. So, move forward into the 90s, late 80s, 90s, and you go to the Amiga. The Amiga, got the 16-bit era now. And video games have come along a long way. The visual quality's come along a long way. You've got a lot more colors now. You can do 256 colors, my God. And even basic 3D is now possible. But at the same time, the cracking scene had grown into the demo scene. And demo scene is the original, the OG, creative coding, making linear, non-interactive experiences in real time on a computer. And more you see how video games look back then. Demos look like this. Demos look better than games. They were more creative and they were more interesting. They could push boundaries in a way that games couldn't. If you were into computing in the 90s on a home computer and you had an Amiga, if you were into pixeling or doing music on the computer or so on, chances are you were in the demo scene because that's where it all happened. Making graphics on these platforms was really difficult. This is pre-internet, really. There's not really many examples going around. You used to have to buy magazines and type stuff in of the listings to try stuff out. If you wanted to figure stuff out, if you wanted to do graphics, you had to figure it out yourself. And if you wanted to write, some 3D, you had to write your own polygon fillers, your own transform processes. You had to write everything. So this is really difficult, and it was very time-consuming, which meant that you had to have a very high technical bar just to do anything, right? And so people did use it, and there was a few examples of people VJing off their Amigas and so on. But this is very early days. There was a relatively limited amount of that. And often while the output might be real time, the process to build it was often very much not. But there's one hardware example from the era. I don't know if anyone remembers the video toaster. Does anyone remember the video toaster? Yeah, classic. This was made by NDI, by the guys who made NDI, the new tech, who we all know and love. And this was this is an add-on card for the Amiga that was pushed Amiga into broadcast. So it was used for things like Babylon 5 and various kind of things. And their trailer video is just amazing. I think it's a real piece of from the era. But it enables some live video manipulation, capture, chroma keying, and so on, right? So it was the first, think of it as a very early notch, but in hardware form. It had all these kind of capabilities. This is very early back in the day. So at the end of the 90s, this is a great video. I love this video. At the end of the 90s, there was a major shift. The first GPUs appeared for PCs. So we're talking 97, I think, we're talking 3DFX. So a GPU at the time, all it was really capable of doing was being given a list of polygons and filling them. That was all it could do back then. But it could do them a lot quicker than you could write in software. So I should have just let that run the whole talk. That reel was great. So this is how video games now looked after the GPU came along. The Battlefield 1942 was released in about 2001. It's a good example. But you can see by the end of the decade, you've got the same developer. This is how stuff looked. So the big thing with the GPU was not just the hardware, but the APIs that came along to support it. So OpenGL, DirectX came along. And combined with the hardware, it meant that you could get polygons on screen very quickly. You could write 10 lines of code, and you can have a polygon on screen, rather than writing thousands of hand-optimized lines of assembler to achieve the same thing when you're in software. So this, at the same time as the internet, the internet came along, and was widely accessible, which meant that you had a ton of tutorials and the software and the hardware there to make graphics. You could actually do graphics without being a very good coder. And this is arguably what led to the boom in creative coding. This is why creative coding became massive, because all of a sudden it was quite easy. You could do it. Particularly when you take into conjunction with things like OpenCV, which gave you a load of tools to do image and video processing and analysis. So all of a sudden, you had these bits that you could plug together. So you see in the PC, like on the PC games of the 2000s, the GPUs got fast really quickly, right? Really, really quickly. So everything went 3D. So initially, all the GPU could do was shade triangles. So games like the one on the left, they look very basic, like textured, simple stuff. But over time, they became programmable, and you could actually write code that ran on the GPU. And this really enabled people to do really clever materials and so on. So by the end of the decade, like the possibilities had leaped enormously, and as had the power of the hardware. Like PC demos, like the demo scene went on PC as well. And the thing with PC is that they made much more creative use of the GPU than video games could. Like you've got the demo on the left, everything is made from particles in sort of 2005 kind of era. So the 2000s were, as I said, it was really the golden age of creative coding. Frameworks such as Open Frameworks and Cinder appeared. Has anyone ever used Open Frameworks? Yeah, it must be some. And this made it even more accessible to code graphics. You could make a piece of, like an interactive graphics project very easily just using their toolkit and their samples. And it had support for video playback and camera capture and image processing from OpenCV and so on. And while the capabilities were pretty limited, and compared to games and demos, it did not look spectacular, it was often good enough to do something creative. And the limitations often drove the aesthetic, right? So people knew they could make flat shaded polygons look good, so they used flat shaded polygons and lots of text and this kind of thing. But at the same time, you had powerful enough projectors that were viable to do, and cheap enough to use in all kinds of shows. And you have a MacBook Pro that's got a GPU good enough to run stuff live, real time. And so suddenly you saw projection mapping came along. Like people started to do projection mapping a lot because you had the intersection of projectors that were good enough. You get a 15K projector, chuck it on the building in the dark, it looks good. You can run them off a MacBook Pro, it's good enough. And you had the software toolkit available to do it. So why do you think these things happen? Because the things come together that make them easy enough and doable enough that people did them. We also started to see the first kind of real-time tools. So Max MSP is quite a lot older than this, back from the 80s, but Touch Designer's first version was 2002, I believe. So you started to see the first tools. And I also have to mention UVA here, but I think UVA is exemplary of a range of creative studios at the time. So what UVA did really well, in my opinion, was that they took these kind of creative, these technologies, like they had low-res LED, they had the toolkits for creative coding, and good engineering as well. But they really found an aesthetic that overcame the creative limitations of what they were dealing with. So they went for black and white with a little bit of red on LED. It looks good. It punches through. Lots of text, rather than 2D text, rather than going for 3D that looked a bit dodgy. A lot of text. Often very structural, simple forms that when you put them on LED, they look great. They took what was even back then for the time. Technically, it wasn't that advanced, but they made it look good. They made it art. And there was a load of studios doing the same thing at this time, but I think UVA were arguably one of the standouts for the kind of quality of work and the fact they really made it art. So towards the end of the decade, there was another major development. So GPUs went past just filling triangles, right? They weren't just filling triangles on screen anymore. They were actually capable and fast and flexible enough to do other stuff, not just fill triangles, but actually do other bits of the pipeline. So like CUDA came along at that kind of time, and people started to use them for simulations, finance, AI, like crunching, anything that needed a lot of number crunching, you could do on the GPU. And this is something that games actually were quite slow to adopt because they already made the GPU very busy. So it didn't really take off in video games for another 5 years or more. But for live and interactive projects, it opened up some really interesting creative capabilities. You don't necessarily need loads of 3D in a live project. What you want to do is a nice interactive particle effect or a smoke effect or something like that. So that enabled, you could do that now on the GPU. So all of a sudden, you started seeing these kind of projects that use a lot of particles, a lot of sims like that. Because you could do them on the GPU, you could do 10 times more. They meant that they actually looked good enough to be viable. Previously, you could do it, but it didn't look good enough, so you didn't want to do it. Clients didn't want it. Now you can make it look good enough. It was worth doing. So look at PC games in the 2010s. So I've shown two versions of the same game. So you can see how far visually things came in around 20 years. It's an astonishing move forward as they try to target photorealism. Sorry, beer break. One of the most obvious changes in video game development over those years was the size of team that was responsible for production. So when I started in video games in 2001, you can make a AAA game with 20 to 30 people. By the time, by the end of the decade and the middle of last decade, teams were sort of 300 to 500. Like the increase in scale was enormous. And most of the people doing that were involved in the art production. All those assets, all those many variations of crates and walls and so on, they all had to be made by someone. And the quality of assets the demand for quality kept going up and up. Like back in 2001, you could make an asset with a few hundred polys and one texture. You could do it very quickly. But when you have to make 10,000 and loads of textures and detailed materials, the production process is much longer. So you have to change the processes to accommodate it. So the first thing that changed heavily was the use of outsourcing and stock libraries for art production. Initially, it was outsourcing because there weren't any stock libraries back then. So rather than build everything in-house, you spec the modeling work and you send it out, maybe to India or something, where they build it a lot cheaper, and they send it back, and they do it. And this is something that I kind of imagine would be done more in live, but we don't really see it. You can kind of see as the demands of production goes up, you have to split the thing up into pieces that can be distributed out to other places and done more cheaply, more cost-effectively, right? So rather than have all the in-house team doing everything in the game, the in-house team is just doing the lighting, the finishing, the hero characters, and so on, the stuff that's worth doing in-house. But all the props and the environment pieces, they're done outside. They're outsourced. So back in the early 2000s, when all the graphics were done in-house, everything could be bespoke. Like you could make different things for every location. You could paint the lighting into the vertices or into textures because you know where it's going to be. You just paint it in. And you could do it all by eye. You could just guess, like do it all by eye, make it look good. Every engine had its own look, its own lighting, material look, and its own calculations. But with the higher demand for content and for outsourcing, you have to standardize everything because you need studios to be able to build stuff without having to use the internal engine, right? So this is where PBR came in. So people familiar with PBR, bit 3D world? So PBR is like physically based rendering. This is pretty much standard. Like every graphics tool these days has the same kind of material pipeline and the same look. Why do you think that was done? It's not done because it looks better. Arguably, it does look better. It was done because you needed to standardize everything in order to be able to outsource graphics. You need to be able to push it out. So PBR, rather than having these kind of every engine having its own calculations, its own material, its own parameters, you standardize it all. So standard set of equations, standard textures, standard parameters. It means you can share stuff between tools and engines, and it also means you've separated material and lighting. So it means you can make a material, and it works in any lighting environment. Like if you move it to a different lighting environment, it still looks like the right material. Whereas previously, it was all fudged, like it was all done in the material to make the lighting look good. So the adoption of PBR, it meant that an outsourcing studio could build an asset, test it in their own environment with reasonable confidence that when they move it to the game engine, it will still look good. So more recently, we've seen stock libraries appear, such as Megascans, right? It's great library. The challenge with stock assets is the art style. Like the assets you use when you're in a project have to fit the art style of what you're doing, right? You can't, if you have a cartoon thing and you use a random kind of sci-fi character, it won't look right. They have to all be done in keeping. So if your game is stylized and you're going to go to a stock library, how are you going to find a load of stock that fits your style? So it's interesting, Brian Karras from Unreal was discussing this. So Unreal has made a massive drive towards photorealism and handling much higher poly assets as well. So if photorealism is your art style, then all you need from your assets is that they're photorealistic. You don't have to worry about different styles. It just has to look real. So it's like if you're making a movie and you need some props, you go to the prop shop down the road, you buy a load of props. If you're making a game, you should be able to go to the virtual prop shop, buy a load of virtual props and drop them in. You don't have to make everything anymore. It massively reduces the production cost. That is the theory anyway. So you can see a lot of the drive, like the engine work, has been partly because photorealism is very popular, but also because this standardization is really useful for production. The irony is that photorealism used to be considered the difficult, expensive thing, right? It was really hard to do photorealism. But nowadays, you can see that in the future, it's probably going to be that photorealism is cheap. That's the easy thing to do. Anything stylized is going to be difficult. This does have some sort of relevance in live. Like, there's not that many live projects which are photoreal outside of virtual production. There's a lot more stylization involved. And it's also unusual, particularly in music. One designer builds a whole track, typically. You don't have a production flow. In video games, you have a whole pipeline of production. You don't really see that so much in live. But it's inevitable, I think, that as live projects have to use more 3D, have to get bigger, you have to explore different ways of getting these assets. And then there's the engines themselves. At the beginning of the 2000s, there were very few engines, like third-party engines used in games. I can think of Renderware and not very many others. They were used in the industry, but by and large, they were rendering toolkits, or they were level tools designed for a certain game, right? Unreal Engine just started. Unity didn't start till the middle of the decade. But by the end of the decade, Unity and Unreal had a massive presence in the video games industry. So while internal teams making their own engines could beat Unreal or Unity in terms of performance or in terms of rendering quality, they couldn't match them for the tools. Like, tools made by game teams had a notorious reputation for being total garbage to use, and the only people who used them were the people who were paid to use them because they had to. Like, no one wanted to use these tools. So, but when the game engines, while the engines had their limitations, back then particularly, the appeal of having proper tools with like a working manipulator that you could use to drag stuff around and so on, it was just too great. So game teams started asking, they wanted the engines, they wanted the user experience. And this ultimately led, there was so much concentration of development in the engines, giving this massive feature set that everything from a whole pipeline for baking light maps and optimizing LEDs all the way through to the rendering, you just couldn't match it in-house. So the other advantage engines had over in-house teams, in-house engines making game engines, is the marketing and commercial development side. It's a bit slightly controversial, but publishers started to push, so engines started to do marketing, and they started to do deals with publishers. Publishers started to push engines onto projects because they wanted the engine on the project, or because they were told that it would be better if they used the engine. Like, this game will be good if we use Unreal. This game will be good because we're going to use Unity. It's less risk to do this project because we're going to use Unity, that kind of thing. So it started to get harder and harder to get funding for a project unless you were using certain engines. And this really led to a decline in the number of companies who made their own tech. 20 years ago, everybody made their own tech. Now, very few companies actually make their own tech. It used to be one of the key roles in video games, like the graphics engine programmer, and now it's a dying art. So what this unfortunately means is if you did want to make a custom engine, it's quite hard to find anyone who can do it. So I think in live, we've seen a similar trajectory, right? Over the last decade, originally, 2000s, everyone's creative coding. Interactive and stuff was often considered a bit of a science project because it's using custom code. Now, fast forward to last decade, middle of last decade, with things like touch and notch, you don't do custom coding anymore. You use these tools, and it's considered far less risky because you're using a software off the shelf. And as a result, creative coding has really dropped off. Like people still do, there's a bit of processing or 3JS, but how often do you see in a live production someone going and writing an open frameworks app anymore? It's much less common. So we have to talk about Notch has been somewhat responsible for that decline, better or worse, right? But these tools have really increased the accessibility of making real-time in projects. Like even 10 years ago, it was still considered a risk. Like nowadays, real-time stuff is everywhere in projects. It's become a standard. Like when I used to talk about this 10 years ago, people gave me funny looks. So like, why on earth would you do that? It's never going to happen. And now it's pretty much standard. It's like it's also, in the 2010s as well, like the video games industry really split. So there was a split from AAA and indie, whereas previously there was a lot of games kind of at the mid-level. This is like, in the old days, every game was sold in a box. So you were guaranteed that it might end up in the Walmart bargain bin, but someone's gran is still going to buy it for their birthday, so you still sold units. The problem is when things went online, when it all downloads went into mobile phones and when it downloads, you can put a game out on download and you can sell 0 copies. Like I know some guys who did a PS4 title on download. It sold 64 copies. Like the risk became massive. So rather than always guarantee that you'll sell like 100, 200,000 units, now you can do something and it could sell millions or it could sell nothing. And the risk is huge, and also the cost is so huge that a lot of the like the big titles like Call of Duty and there's a very few number of very, very big titles that people play for a very long time. And the industry's very risk averse. There's a lot of sequels. It's all franchises and sequels. And then there's indie doing all the interesting stuff with no money and all the risk. And you can kind of imagine this being true in live, right, as well. Like as the cost goes up and the demands go up, are people really going to be able to do these risky things when there's a lot more stakeholders and a lot more money involved? Is the risk and the interesting stuff going to drop down to the smaller productions that can take the risk? So the other thing, talk about the engine companies again, like the other relevance to engine companies is the size of companies involved. Like live events is used to small companies. You're all used to dealing with small vendors in the software side, right? Like a typical live event software company is 20 people, 10 people is small. And that, the vendor is often a similar size of company to the client. And that means the client, like, your companies might be 20 people, 30 people, some are a lot bigger. Like some of the clients are much bigger than the companies providing the stuff. And that means the client has a certain amount of influence on the vendor. You can ask for stuff, you can get support, you can say, like, I want this, will you do it? And they'll do it and they'll get involved. When the scale of companies, I think what we've seen, that particularly over COVID and over the last 5 years, the scale of companies involved in the space has gone through the roof. We are talking billion, Unity is a multi-billion-dollar company and so is Unreal. And they're much bigger players than any of the players in the live events industry. So the power balance has shifted. And they wield their influence in some ways, like sometimes directly via things like mega grants. And sometimes, some companies say, we'll support you, but only if you give us the marketing rights. And others are able just to wield influence by doing marketing. And what this means for you is it means like it's not just you they're marketing to, they're marketing to your clients. So your clients are going to come along and go, I want this because I've seen this ad on Instagram and it looks super good. Everyone does it, but the scale and power of these companies is a shift for live events. I don't think live events is used to dealing with this kind of scale. I think there's a mindset adoption, a change that has to happen in mindset. So the reality is, I'm going to move on a slide. Oh, I'm going to go back a slide first, actually. The reality is that many techniques and tools and engines in the graphics world, they're taken from video games. Like we've repurposed them from video games. So they're developed first for video games, right? I banged on about it most of the talk. And video games, they're only really suitable for a certain tech stack. They only do certain things. There's some really key differences between video games and what you do in live events. That means that the tech stack doesn't naturally translate all the time. If you think a video game renderer, the graphics engine is pretty narrow, actually. All it really has to do is put objects on screen. A lot of the geometry is static. A lot of the lighting is baked, or the light doesn't move. Like it's either sunlight that doesn't move, or it's inside with lights that don't really move. The camera motion is controlled by the player, so it's very predictable. You know where the camera, and it's only one camera, it doesn't cut very much. Animations are often baked. Visual effects like smoke can be handled just by pre-rendered cards. They don't need to be interactive. The tools are often targeted at very large teams, and processes in place to bake lighting, optimize materials, build LODs, do this whole process, right? And they also have to make everything play nice for streaming. Like they have to make environments where it's predictable. Like you know that you can slow the player down to make sure they're not gonna pull too much in too quickly. AAA games have a massive optimization cycle. The last year of development of a AAA game is usually taken up with optimization. Like it's an enormous amount of work. And also optimization includes things like fixing the assets to work out a bit of aliasing on an edge of a box or something like that. It's all these little fixes. Video games don't have to worry about splitting renders across multiple machines. You basically only have to worry about going to a 4K TV at most. And if you are rendering 4K, it's going to be upscaled. No one renders 4K. You render lower than HD and you upscale it. And they accept some quality drops and so on in order to maintain frame rate. They don't mind if the render quality drops. In live events, I don't believe clients are that tolerant if you drop frames or drop quality or you pop a LOD or whatever, right? So the demands are different, and also the production process in live is completely different. You don't have a year of optimization generally, do you? No? So your turnaround has to be super fast. You have to optimize, and you don't have time to polish and optimize in the way a video game does, unfortunately. So I'm going to talk about a couple of the current or future graphics techniques that you should be thinking about in live a bit more. So it's interesting with Unreal. Like Unreal introduced Nanite and Lumen. Like Nanite is a really clever thing. It's a combination of mesh clustering and simplification for rendering polygons. And they have a software rasterizer as well for doing very tiny polygons really well, which is something GPUs do very badly. But this engine is an outlier. This is not where everyone else is going. The reason they did this was that they had to target the current generation of consoles which didn't have a good ray tracing part. The rest of the world, the non-games world, is going towards ray tracing. And it's interesting, this is one of the two big developments in the last few years and going forward have been GPUs gaining ray tracing capability and AI. So let's talk about both. But first, let's talk about scalability. So Live always wants to handle bigger renders and like 100 million pixel canvases, as Isabel said, and so on. And you want to split your renders between multiple GPUs and multiple machines, because you can't do it all on one machine. That's something no one else has to do. Like games don't have to do it. No one has to do this except Live, really. So you're Live as an outlier. And typically it's achieved, like the problem is the techniques that are used in a lot of products, they're not designed for the case of being split. So it doesn't necessarily work that well. Things like the shadow generation or probe generation, that has to happen the same on every machine. So you add two machines, you don't double your performance. It might go up like 1.3, something like that. The more stuff that can't be split has to be shared and done on all the machines. And this requires some engineering. It needs live targeted engineering to make this work well. That isn't really happening that much at the moment. The same is true of simulations. Like if you've got a big particle effect, it probably has to run the same thing on every machine. So if you split it, it's not going to make any improvement. It's not going to make any difference. But some of there is technology coming along, like the Mellanox networking parts that enable stuff to be streamed directly to a GPU. GPUs with a lot more addressable memory, so you can have video that's there in memory. These kind of things do help in this area of technology. But really, we have to think the future that we need to develop, that hopefully will happen in the next couple of years, is the ability to design stuff to be split and scaled more effectively. And the future of that is not cutting a render down the middle and put it on two machines. The future of that is breaking up the pieces of the pipeline and doing them on multiple machines and streaming them like you would on a render farm. Like we don't want to build video games. We want to build render farms, but live, real-time ones. So one machine does the particle effect, and it streams it to the next machine, which does the shading and lighting, and it streams it to the next machine that outputs it on screen, or several machines that output on screen. And then you have another machine that might be doing post effects or piping up bits of processing and piping it in. This is the kind of thing that needs to work. So I'll talk about, like, ray tracing was a major, like the RTX came along and they introduced the ray tracing part. So GPUs can do ray tracing now. This is really great. So path tracing has become viable. Like, you can do this now. Path tracing is a way of, that's just a light simulation method where you cast loads and loads of samples of a ray that bounces all the way around your scene, works out what it hits and shades, gives you a color. And if you do this 10,000 times per pixel, you get a nice result. You get a very realistic render. The problem is because it's noisy. It takes a very large amount of time to do all those samples. And this is a huge problem even for rendering out, even for offline. It's a massive problem. If you've got minutes or hours for a frame, it's not very practical. So in real time, complete nightmare, right? It's also very problematic for high resolutions because you have to, more pixels equals more time, 10,000 times of pixels. But at least with ray tracing on the hardware, it became viable to do this. So the other thing that actually this created, releasing ray tracing hardware, it's not the most interesting thing about it wasn't the hardware itself. It's all the research that got kicked off when that hardware became available. So suddenly, like, a very niche area of research before of making path tracing look good with very, very few samples suddenly became the big hot topic, right? Loads and loads of people putting effort into this. So actually it became quite viable to, like you can see on my example here, I've done rendered in Notch, of course, like 2,000 samples and how it looks at one sample. So if you did this in the old version of Notch, it would just look like noise. It would look like nothing. But because of all the research we've done, including by ourselves, we've managed to get a one sample per pixel image that looks quite viable. Like, it's noisy, you wouldn't put it on screen, but it works. One sample per pixel you can do in real time. I can do that in real time. And the advantage of this in live is that path tracing splits perfectly. If you double the number of GPUs, if you double the number of cores, if you double the number of boxes, double the speed. So it splits linearly, and that is a real key. If you're going to go to big canvases, you need techniques that split as close to linearly as possible. And path tracing also looks really good. It's a lot easier to make renders when you have a path tracer because you don't have to fiddle things and fake things. It just works. So as this becomes viable for live, this is really it will make production easier. It also scales very well. So whereas Nanite had to do a huge amount of work to make a scalable renderer, ray tracing scales way better than linearly. It just works. So if you have very high poly scenes, it works. So the other thing with segues is the next topic. The other part is denoising. Right? So this is I took the same one pixel render and I put it through an AI denoiser. It's still flickering, but it's way more viable. So this is actually not that far from being real time now in some projects, particularly if you have a load of So I guess we've got to talk about the elephant in the room, AI. You can't really talk about AI without talking about machine learning. I don't really want to talk about stable diffusion in mid-journey. This is tricky for me because as an artist, it's up to you. As a software vendor, the moral aspect of this is a little dubious because some of your users hate it and some of your users love it. So it's a very hard place to be for a software vendor. Stable diffusion in mid-journey, the idea of taking all of human creative output and putting it in a box and selling it back to you is definitely anathema for some people. Until the legality and morality of this is resolved, it's dodgy. However, ML has way more applications than generating images. So we've already seen AI and ML being used quite a bit already. So here's an example of, we used the NVIDIA body tracker in Notch. There's also background removal. AI for computer vision is an amazing tool. Like, you can solve a lot of problems which require a bit of fuzzy thinking perfectly with AI. And there's been a huge growth of these things. There was a paper last week on solving green screen using AI. They didn't do what you think they do. They didn't use it to remove the green. What they do is they say, you have the green screen and you shoot everyone in magenta. And then the AI regenerates the green channel. You cut the green out, get rid of everything, and then you just regenerate the green with AI. If you can shoot everything magenta, it sounds like a very viable use case. So there's been a load of ML being applied to graphics, and this is way more interesting to me. So we've seen things like denoising. We saw already, like DLSS is something you're probably familiar with, and AI denoising. These are kind of early use cases that are really applicable. So AI denoising is quite logical how it works. You take the noisy image, and you train the noisy image against the fully refined image enough until the thing knows how to turn a noisy image into a refined image. You just put enough through it, then it works. DLSS is another similar example. So you train the neural net on motion vectors and like alias to anti-aliased images. And then it works out how to do it, and you get a small neural net that you can run in real time. But there's loads more interesting kind of use cases in the pipe, like up-resing simulations. So you generate a low-res smoke sim, or you generate a particle sim with like 100,000 particles, and then use a neural net to upscale it to like 10 million, 100 million. These kind of, or material compression, like you take so there was already the use case of taking albedo, like a color image, and it generates normals and specular and so on for you. But the people are using it for compression now. So if I have a material and I have a load of channels in the material, rather than storing all the different channels separately, I use a neural net to generate the other channels from the albedo in just the neural net's trained on that one material, so it knows how to regenerate it. This is where things are getting really interesting, I think, is that all these kind of problems that are now having ML applied to them is going to really increase the rate of movement. But for live, I think particularly, like, you're seeing AI take on things that previously required hardware to be done. So instead of having, instead of doing mocap with a suit, you do it with a ML, you do it with a neural net. Instead of doing camera tracking, do you use a neural net? Do you just have a camera and the neural net knows where it's going? Do you need to track points? Can you just get a neural net to do it? These kind of things, when they work and when they're brought in, they obviously make it massively cheaper and more accessible to do these kind of technologies in a way that, now all you need is a camera. You don't need a camera and a huge tracking system. And, it's not going to be immediately like films, high-end productions. You're going to stick with your Stipe system for some time in this room. But when you're talking about theater or a live performance or something like that, if the cost is brought right down because it's done in software, it makes it way more viable, right? I think I am just over time, so I'm going to end. I didn't talk about Notch, but we just entered private beta. Please sign up. This is 1.0. It's been a very long gestation, a very painful one. And but we are now at the stage where you can sign up and get access and try it out. Please do that. Please sign up and you'll get access. Because I didn't have enough to do, I decided to build the presentation in Notch. I'm not sure if this was the best idea of my life, but I can show you. This is 1.0 in action. Oops. So I cleverly built the slides in Notch. I don't know if it actually worked quite well. I was quite pleased with it. But you can see we've completely redone the UI. We've redone all of, the engine has changed as well. There's some really nice new features. It's incredibly powerful, new rendering engines. Everything is new, so please grab the beta when you're able to and check it out. I'm going to end there. Any questions? Questions? Any? Everyone wants to leave, don't they?
No, questions for Matt. If anyone has any questions, you have mics on either side. There's one in back. Go for it. Oh, no, microphone. We want to hear you.
You don't have to answer this, but did you have one of those cool hacker names for some of the softwares?
Yes.
Think?
No, I'm not going to tell you what it was.
Offline.
You can find it on the internet.
Pablo down in front. Run around. This guy with the head right here. Ooh. There you go.
Does the private beta say, demolition on the error window?
We weeded those out. That took some time. We had to change the registry, man. We had to change everything to get that to work. That was not as easy as you might think, getting rid of that.
Congrats.
There's a new docking system as well, so you don't have to find the 1 pixel that you used to move the panel.
How does it feel to have arrived at 1.0?
It doesn't feel like we're quite there yet. It's going to feel really good when it actually comes out. But yeah, it's been a long process. Like, turns out redoing your entire UI takes longer than you think it would. That's why no one wants to do it. Yeah.
With the new 1.0 rollout, where's the best way to get resources and training on what's new and what to find?
So in private beta, there's not very much, but there will be. Someone has to go and re-record all of the training content because the UI has changed. But there is going to be tons and tons of content. The manual's already up. We've kept the manual. We've made a new manual as well. We kept the manual up, but there's going to be tons of videos and resources. Also, it should be a bit easier to use now. We hope. We actually tested it on real people.
Down here in front, we got one? Before you.
Yeah. I had a question for you. So with this new version, is there any new use cases or challenges that the main ones that you're trying to solve thinking of this?
So I guess the big pitch, apart from the UI, there's a few really big fundamental changes. See, I should have just talked about Notch, shouldn't I? I should have just talked about Notch. I'm sorry about that. Also, the rendering engines are all completely redone. And that was really done. We wanted to achieve a unification of renderers. You have an offline, like a very high quality, very fast path tracer that runs, in real time, but it refines. And then you have real-time real-time renderers as well. But they're all designed to be interchangeable. You can switch them by switching a node. And they're all designed to have the same look. Because we did the path tracer first, and we made the other engines try and match that rather than like a bad mix as it used to be. So this means that you can switch. So if you want quality, you can just switch the renderer. If you want faster, you can switch to a different renderer. And this is, if you're in a hurry, or if you want to use the same thing offline or rendered, or one of the most useful things is you can see how it should look if it's perfect, and therefore what adjustments you need to make the real-time one look good. So the renderers was a huge undertaking. Also, the field system's been redone. You can see the cloud thing that was running in the background is our new field volumetric simulation system. One of the biggest changes, I think, overall is the introduction of assets. So assets are a concept where you can take, I've actually used this. I actually used this myself. So I built, hang on, it's really tricky to do, sorry, but I can do this. So I built the slides using our asset system. So there's one node, which is a template, where I built the sort of layout of the slides. And then you expose, so I exposed like the text and inputs for the images. So all I have to do for each slide is hook videos and change the text. And the thing's just a reusable concept, a piece of, a reusable tool. And if I change the template, all the instances update. And if I saved that template out and gave it to you, you could use the same template. You just drag it in and you just see a node that you change. This is a really big concept. So we have a library, we're sharing, enables users to share content, and we provide content. So instead of having to know, you can build things just from these individual nodes, which actually contain a whole ton of more complicated nodes. It's a really big change.
Oh.
What do you mean? Notch never crashed. Notch has never. I've never seen Notch crash. I shut my eyes a lot.
Scott.
Just a quick one on back into the talk there, the path tracing in real time and live. What are the challenges at the moment? Is it hardware? Is it software? Is it user knowledge? Like what kind of timescales or like roadblocks do you see?
The biggest problem is the speed. So the biggest problem is going to be like splitting. It's going to be how we do really good network distribution of renders, ideally in low latency, because you want to be able to buy more kit, right? You say, I want it to go faster or look better. I'll buy another box. Don't want to have to read all your content, or if things linearly scale, that's the impact it has. And hopefully those boxes, you can just plug another one into the rack and you get more. But this needs to work in distribution terms. A lot of the rendering technology is all there. It's just the distribution that needs to work. And it might be, we have to figure out what happens with denoising. Like that doesn't split quite so well. And it is not that stable anyway when you look at the wobbly video that was on screen. And that's the NVIDIA one. I think that's another area of research that's moving really quickly. So you wait a year, it's probably going to be better.
And another one floating over there somewhere.
Okay, I have two quick questions. One is, when is the next NotchCon?
But we don't need to do NotchCon anymore because we have Framework. Do you know how hard it is to organize you know how hard it is to organize a con.
Yeah.
Like that took 3 months of the entire company to do. Like nothing happened apart from people doing NotchCon. It was ridiculous.
Okay, so my second question is a bit more tricky, and it's about the price. Is there any changes that you have in considering about price? Like open the range a bit more for artists, or because it's more targeted for live industry, which is great. And just want to know if there's anything that you have thought about that.
There is going to be some changes. It's a bit tricky how much I can say before it's announced, but I think one thing we can say is that there's going to be an indie license. So like a very cheap license that's actually usable to do stuff with without watermarks, but it's cheap and designed for indie users or not projects that aren't Taylor Swift. So yeah, there will be some change. There will be some improvements. We want to make it more accessible.
Mm-hmm. I think we have time for one more. We got wherever it is.
So my question for you is actually looking back at the past of the demo scene. Is there a tool or philosophy or some type of technique that you wish was still present in this day and age?
Oh, that's tricky. I mean, do love a good copper bar, but I don't know. I think you have to move with the times. I don't really look back and think, God, I wish I was still doing that. Like, I think you should always move with the times. Nostalgia is not necessary in production. You always got to keep moving. So yeah, I'm quite glad that some of that old stuff went away, to be honest. I guess the only thing that I think you could miss is the production. It's a process of like a coder sitting down and coding stuff to make effects. It's not how you do it. Everyone, you use tools and you use frameworks and things because it's also very painful to do all your animation by writing code and rerunning it again from the start every time for 4 minutes. But yeah, there are advantages for this, but there was something nice about sitting there and hacking something together, and you don't really do that anymore. But yeah, in terms of visual things, no, glad it's gone.
All right. Is that the end? Amazing. Do you want me to let you leave stage now, or?
Can I leave the stage now?
Yeah. Okay. Perfect. Thanks everyone for
Thank you very much.
Appreciate it. Maybe Laura and I can speak while he's awkwardly breaking down.
We can use Matt as our backdrop.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
stay right there.
No, you can just stay the whole time.
So we'll is my mic on?
Can we get Laura's mic on?
Or I might need a handheld if I killed the battery again.
Oh, maybe.
Do you see me?
Check, check.
Check. You got it? All right. Thank you, guys. Yes, thank you. Thank you, everyone. This has been an incredible 2 days. I'm just wowed by everyone's generosity and excitement that we're creating around here. So thank you for joining us. I'm excited for the future of Framework, and we will always have Matt breaking down as our backdrop.
Yeah, it's perfect. It's glass. It's clear. Yeah, I think, we've all been speaking with each other in the hallways and either drinks last night. Thank you, Matt. We've all been catching up about this. Hopefully you've had valuable conversations, but again, I'm going to echo it again, kind of what Ben said last night, and what Laura's been speaking about is that this group is only what we make of it. So I really encourage you, if this is enjoyable to you, to please reach out to us to see how you could help or be involved or make more things like this happen. I think there's a world that a vision of the campus you're on now, our home here at XR Studios, part of the vision is to do stuff like this all the time. And I would love there to be a monthly framework meetup or different little talks about all these little things that we talked about. But as Matt just spoke about NotchCon, it takes time and effort and people, and everyone in this room is doing 100 other things at once. So we're in a very busy industry, but yeah. Yeah.
You know, like SIGGRAPH, they have local chapters and they organize local events and meetings and so on. Is that something you consider doing for framework?
So Matt is asking about local chapters. We have plans for 2024. Plans like time cost money, right? So we are looking for ways to regionalize or create chapters for framework so there can be local activity. Tito Sabatini is here. I don't know if you've met him, but he is going to be our experiment in that structure by creating Framework Brazil. So what we can achieve right now as volunteers is this annual conference. And we would like to do a lot more, honestly. Either if it's, monthly, every couple of months we get an event. I know we have sponsor partners who are interested in supporting the community, speaking the way we like to around projects, either with our No Victory Laps theme, live pixel people and what that represents. We want to bring together the community with our sponsors to get more messaging out there about the people who do this work. We want to get out from behind the video walls or the dark rooms and the all-night shifts and tell our stories. Because the essence of this community is we have all these different silos that we operate in, and when we learn each other's process, we excel in our work. We get new ideas. We learn new approaches about how to succeed or change what we do for the better. This community, bringing it together is to make us stronger, ultimately to make us better partners to our clients and that they have more awareness of what we do. And then the other piece is, of course, bringing in new talent into the community and giving them the experience and mentorship they need to thrive. So that's regional chapters, that is expanding our sponsor base, that is, I hope, starting professional memberships next year for the community, both individual and studio memberships, as well as what we expect will be a European-based annual event in the fall of next year. I envision a future that we can maybe support 2 of these internationally, whether it's we split it up regionally, much like SIGGRAPH does with an Asia event. We would love to be in Dubai, somewhere in the Asia region as well, whether it's Bangkok, Tokyo. We have community members all over the world. When I checked our stats last night, we have people watching from Africa. We have people watching from all parts of Asia. We are an international community, and I want us to be there talking about those experiences everywhere. So I have big goals. I don't have big pockets yet, but we'll see what we can do.
I think it's pockets and time and gifts of people as well. Everyone here has amazing abilities, but that can be leveraged in the right way. You just have to find that balance of time. So we're working on it internally. Would love your thoughts. Come find us. I think you touched on something as well, which is really interesting with this particular event, is that everyone in this room does what we're doing on stage right now, which is like making a live event. And for my team, I just want to extend a big thank you. And if you can all give a round of applause for all the people who are behind the screen. Because you know how difficult that is for all of the people in the seats, and they've been very patiently watching, but hopefully it's been valuable for all of you as well, and to meet new people. I think, take what you can from this. Some of this will be available online at some point in some sort of form. We'll discuss what that looks like.
I will say quickly to that, the stream has been recorded. Anyone who paid for a stream ticket or is here in attendance, you will get the links for that, and in about a month, I'll have everything posted to our site by session, so you can share it. Please do.
Yeah, I think that's really helpful, is that a small thing that all of you can do is getting exposure to other worlds. It feels like weird social media influencer stuff, but a lot of people who are here this time I've noticed a couple friends in the community that I've met in the last year that are now here, and they go and they tell other people, and it kind of grows and changes, and your map gets created in that way, which is really helpful. So it's not just about getting likes, it's about actually informing other people and connecting other communities as well.
Yeah.
There's a lot of stuff going on this week for SIGGRAPH, and we have a Birds of a Feather event actually
We have a
on
Birds of
Monday.
a Feather Monday, 2 p.m. to 5 p.m., room 512. We're going to do basically open mic, community open mic. I'll be talking about framework. You can bring a short deck and share information about projects, your point of view of being a live pixel producer.
So yeah, if you're not familiar, Birds of a Feather events are events surrounding SIGGRAPH, and SIGGRAPH is this huge conference, but there's all these little siloed things. So please spread the word on that. We have some social media postings about that available. We'd love to see some support there. And it's a great opportunity to bring someone down the hall from another presentation or something like that into our space. With those other things as well, like sharing the speakers and talks, we've actually had a lot of really fun rebirth of content from last year. The London talk, if you weren't there, you should go and look it up and rewatch some of those things. There's some really amazing information there, and that's the point of this group, is that it'll continue to grow and that knowledge changes over time, which is really helpful. Yeah. Moving into housekeeping a little bit, thank you so much, everyone, for coming. It's been super valuable to see everyone in this space. I'm personally very humbled to have everyone here. This space took a lot of work to make, and it's for community, so it's great to have you all here for that. We do not have a happy hour here tonight like we did last night. Apologies, Matt found the beer somewhere, so that's good. But we will have an unofficial sort of thing for, I know a lot of people have dinners and other stuff like that, but anyone who does want to continue your journey and share some drinks and hang out, or if you've traveled here, there's a bar down the street called Harlow with an E, Harlowe. It's walkable about 15 minutes. That will be like a nice little central place if people want to grab a drink and hang out. Not everyone will be there for very long, but that's the spot. It is not Framework sponsored, so it's just a place. And I'm sure everyone will reach out to each other. I would really encourage you, if you haven't met someone new while we're leaving or whatever, introduce yourself. Make sure you get contact information from people on those QR codes. It's really easy to talk to someone and then not know how to get a hold of them later. So use that to connect with each other and use that to coordinate your beverage adventures later if you have them.
Thanks, everyone.
Really appreciate it. Thank you. Ta-da.